Hello, everyone, and welcome to Leaders of Today, Teens to Titans. Today, I want to introduce you to my guest, Steve Pappajohn. Steve is the director of the Dover Teen Center in Dover, New Hampshire. The Teen Center is coordinated by the Community Outreach Bureau of the Dover Police Department. Prior to coming on board with the Dover Teen Center, Steve was an assistant dean of students at the University of New Hampshire, where he specialized in working with fraternity and sorority community there. Steve's focus with the Teen Center and expertise has been leadership development in young people. Today's discussion will focus on the impact of powerful mentors in shaping Steve's leadership journey. We'll explore how these mentors helped him see himself as a leader and how his desire to support others, starting immediately with his siblings and peers, guided him towards the work he does today with young teens. We'll also discuss the choices teens make to play it safe or not, particularly when building connections beyond typical friendships. Steve and I share a vision of partnering to support the Dover Teen Center, aiming to create meaningful opportunities to impact local youth. Our hope is to expand this type of programming to benefit other communities with similar needs. So without further ado, let's jump right into our conversation. You're listening to Today's Leaders, from Teens to Titans. Hi, I'm Lorraine Connell, a teen leadership coach. I transitioned from teaching chemistry to coaching teens in leadership, helping them realize they can do hard things. We've often believed that leadership is an innate trait, but it's actually a skill that you build and improve. On this show, you'll meet today's leaders who share their teenage experiences, revealing how they developed confidence, direction, and the tools to become the leaders they are now. You'll discover how you or the teens in your life have the potential to become confident leaders, even if it doesn't seem possible. Welcome, Steve. I'm glad to have you today.
Hi, Lorraine. Thanks.
Awesome. So I always start these interviews with a question that takes you back down memory lane and asks you to sort of go back to being a teenager and share the experiences that you remember the most from that age and how it's led you to the work that you're doing today with teens.
I think I'd have to start with friendships. One of the things that I was fortunate enough early on, even in like elementary school, was always a very outgoing kid. And that came from my parents. My parents were encouraged, my brother, my sister, and I, they still do. They encourage us to be out there and receive others. And I think I was just very easygoing with that and quickly made friends. And I think that's where I developed a lot of my social skills, working with kids that we mutually showed each other attention, respect, athletic challenges, things like that. There was always something there that showed me that it was reciprocal. It was back and forth. Cool. If you look back on it now when you're old, you don't see it when you're in those adolescent ages and even, grammar school ages. But when you look back on it and a question like this is asked, you can quickly kind of refer to where those influences came from and where the meaning of connection forged for me.
Yeah, I think that's one of my favorite parts of these podcast interviews is that the connection becomes really clear to my guests that the things that happen to them as teenagers have had a real direct impact on who they are and what they're doing now as adults. So can you tell me, I think easygoing is your best attribute when it comes to working with the teens that you're working with. How do you see your easygoing nature making the community feel like a place where I, as a teen, or I am as a struggling teen, am welcome there?
I think it kind of equates to acceptance. That's the word that I would kind of gravitate to when I think of myself as easygoing. I think it's immediately giving someone acceptance, and that lowers any kind of guard that's up for anyone, adults or kids. And when you can lower the guard, and they seem to feel safe and they're willing, and that leads to something we'll be talking about, taking chances. Like, I'll take a chance walking into this place because I heard that this guy is all right. You build a reputation of being a person and fostering a space that shows acceptance from the start. I don't walk in with like, hey, here are the rules. It's about take a look around, feel the vibe, find out how this feels for you. You should be able to find something that you connect to. And some things maybe will take time, but an initial acceptance of that vibe of I welcome you, I want to know you, I hear you, I see you is an important quotient for building that trust in young people. And they can sniff that out real quick, like if they're welcome somewhere or not. And I think if you're the person that's leading that space and that vibe, then it has to jive. If the message was this is an accepting open place, and then you got here and the person running it wasn't like that, it wouldn't work. So I think it just kind of works hand in hand.
Yeah, I want to sort of lean into taking a risk. And I think that often kids, teens, youth will come into a space like what you're running and they'll take a risk at pushing a boundary, right? And so, what happens when I come in not really trusting that it's a safe place and act out? What are some of the tips and tricks that you have learned in responding to teens that push those boundaries?
Well, I think you just have to ask them some questions. You just have to try to get them to give you some feedback. What's not working? Ask them flat out, what is it that's not making you feel like you can just be yourself here and feel comfortable? And most of the time they have something. They give you some like, well, I don't get along with that other kid. And then I can't be here when he's here, or she really bothers me and I can't deal with it. And that brings us into a whole different conversation of like coping mechanisms and sharing space and understanding and respecting others, not having the expectation you have to be their best friend. And, you can find a middle ground. And I think that's one of the things really in the last 10 years, I think is a struggle for young people is like taking that risk to find the middle ground. They're very stubborn. They want to stay in their own space. They use their isolation as a defense, and when you're challenged them to like put themselves out there a little bit and hedge towards the middle, it can sometimes take longer for some of those kids, and that goes back to a whole bunch of other quotients that might be going on in their life and their history. They may have some trauma and they've been not as willing to trust other people. But for the kids who are kind of in the middle of the road there and they're just like, well, I have a reason and this is what it is, and they're kind of stubborn, you have to just kind of challenge them a little bit and get into a conversation. But if they don't want to talk, there's a whole process to that too, is giving a little bit of space, coming back to it. But if we kind of try everything in our playbook, and if that doesn't work, then we kind of have to go back to a conversation of, well, maybe this isn't the right space for you. If it's not healthy for you, if don't feel right here, don't force it. And we should talk to your mom or your guardian and just say, maybe try it in a month or so. Maybe it'll be different, and understand that that's okay. Like, it doesn't have to work the first time. There's a reason why there's not 400 kids at the teen center, but there's a reason why there's 20 or so every day, because they do find that space where they can get the middle ground, feel the connection, have a sense of mattering, and want to be here.
Was the teen center something that was already off the ground when you came to Dover to work, or was this something that was sort of instituted through your work?
Yeah, it's been around for a while, actually. It's been around since the early 90s, but it was a different program. It wasn't coordinated by the police department then. It was coordinated under kind of a human services umbrella. And it was put together for kids that were already in the juvenile system. So it was a place where they had to go. They had to check in. It was connected closely to the juvenile probation office, and it gave those officers a chance to know where their kids were going to be for follow-up conversations. They were given academic support, and they were given, other support too from various staff members in that human services kind of umbrella for the city. And it ran like that for a number of years, and it was becoming increasingly difficult for them to operate because the students that were coming that were part of this program were being gathered together, and there was a high volatile group of kids, and they were continually having problems with fights and other issues, that it got to the point where there was a lot of questions of like, well, maybe this isn't the right space for them. Like, maybe this has run its course and we can continue doing the other stuff through the probation office, through the supports, but like having an after school spot, maybe not the best thing. So in that same time, the police department had found success early with their Dover Youth to Youth program. which is an alcohol, tobacco, and other substance prevention program run by youth for youth with a youth empowerment model. And they were finding successes in that and integrating the existing DARE class stuff and doing presentations and learning speaking skills on various topics around alcohol, tobacco, and other drugs. So what happened was the city was having a directors meeting, and basically police department was willing to take a risk and say, you know what, why don't you let us take over the teen center and we'll take more of a prevention strategy instead of the intervention strategy that it's been operating under. And we'll try to get at-risk youth involved prior to making poor decisions and getting involved in any kind of youth crime type stuff. And we'll give them a space and we'll find someone to kind of get mentoring and stuff like that. And so there was a director that was hired prior to me who got it kind of off at the ground in that model. And he was able to kind of slowly recruit some youth to kind of get it started. And they started in a smaller space in the McConnell Center because it was being renovated. So they had a little upstairs room that was where they started the program up and kind of gave it this new vibe, this new mission of, we want you to come check this out now and be a part of this program. So that operated for about 7 months until that person who was running the program found a job that he really was fit for, outdoor education, kind of high ropes, low ropes kind of stuff that he did his education for. And he took that job. And then it was kind of pieced together by a couple of outreach officers to kind of run and open the doors once in a while. And then they were getting ready to move down to the first floor, and McConnell was almost done. That's when they put the announcement out for the position. And at the time when I was at UNH, I was kind of looking for something different. I was starting a family. I was not really going to be able to do a lot of late nights and weekends, which is where my fraternity and sorority population did a lot of their events. It was going to be hard for me to do. And I was also just kind of, I think I had ran my course there. I'd kind of done whatever I could do. I couldn't achieve much more, and there was no upward movement in the university. So in a matter of 2 days back to back, I had professionals that worked with committee work and introduced me to this position. So I thought after 2 days, 2 different people telling me about this, it was a sign to kind of check it out. And as they say, the rest is history. So that's how we kind of evolved over the years.
And how do teens now become aware of the opportunity at the teen center?
Been able to build that great network of getting to know counselors and administrators and even some teachers at the middle school and the high school. And anytime they hire someone new, I make it a point to go in and talk to them and give them kind of like a teen center 101. And then the best part about it, and what's so authentic about the teen center, is that it's mostly word of mouth. Kids tell each other. And that's where you know you're really kind of reaching something that's kind of special, because if the best advertisement is someone saying, hey, I go there, this is the best, like you should come with me. And that's how we've grown over the years, is just somebody telling a friend and then that friend coming in, and then we get them registered, and then we coordinate with their parents or guardians and say, oh, yep, this is what you get. You know, this is the information I always give out, and here's what you'll be linked to, and here's where we post things, and get them all in the network. And then we let them know very clearly, like, you can come as much or as little as you want. There's no boundaries. There's no fees. The door is open, and we'll let you know if we change hours from time to time, but you know what to expect, and you can just come as much as we want or as little as you want. And that's, I think, the freedom of having a place that gives you choices like that, where there's nothing binding really. I've had kids who have come for a couple of years, then we don't see them for a year, and then they're back because their interests change a little bit and they come back. And then we've had, you know, the kid who comes in for 3 weeks and we never see them again for whatever reasons. And some of them move, some of them get other interests, sports maybe get into their world, or clubs and organizations, and then they start to focus. And then as the teens get a little bit older, they start getting first-time jobs after school. That takes up their time, and then you see them maybe during vacation weeks when they have some free time. So it's a very nice evolution of, you're always bringing in some younger people, because I think the counselors do a great job of saying to, you know, kids who aren't eligible yet because of their grade, hey, next year you might want to check this out. Like, probably heard a lot about it. And sure enough, every new school year, we get a nice influx of parents and kids checking us out. And then we just connect to other things like open houses and, you know, but I don't do a whole lot of recruiting. It's actually a nice way of not feeling like you're pushing a program onto someone. It's, you know, we're at events and things like that, and people want to talk to us, they can. But otherwise, it's mostly just banking on a kid saying, hey, I got my buddy with me today. Is that cool? And come on in, let's show them around, and seeing how they connect to it. And then that just snowballs. And I always tell new students who kind of maybe get a referral from like a counselor, I'm like, you know, remember, you can grab your friends and start hanging out here. And a lot of times, like, oh, really? I can do that? Oh, yeah, of course. I go, if you don't know too many people here, why not bring the people you already know here? Blows their mind for a minute. And they're like, oh, that sounds great. I can definitely have a friend that I think would want to come. And I'm like, bring them next time you want, and we'll show them around and see if it's a good fit.
That's awesome. And I think the shift from being sort of a punitive aspect to being a reward and a voluntary aspect really makes a huge difference in prevention. So, what is the connection to the police department at this point?
Yeah, I think it's just prevention based. The Community Outreach Bureau has a strong prevention and intervention kind of vibe. So we've grown so much over the years I've been here, where we have the youth to youth program doing substance prevention for youth. Then we have the teen center, which is kind of like that connection piece where we're giving them a place where, they can make good decisions, learn about choices, and get that really a mix of passive and intentional leadership development that kind of happens. And those social skill development, when you talk about at-risk youth, some of that stuff hasn't been taught in the home because it's not the priority. The priority is living day to day and paying bills and trying to make sure that there's a status quo for the people living there. And sometimes those other little things go through the cracks where they don't learn how to understand what integrity means, those buzzwords around leadership, and how choices really make a difference in their daily life and things of that nature. And that's where, as a police department, there's a commitment to reducing youth crime, which is, the statistical piece behind it of like, well, we don't have a lot of young people committing misdemeanors and God forbid felonies. Like, we're doing pretty good. That means like our youth in our community is probably doing okay in general from a crimes perspective. But with the evolution of how we look at mental health now, the teen center has taken on that whole umbrella too, of like, we train our youth mentors in some basic mental health first aid things. So that way they can identify some things when they're talking to these kiddos and can learn how to dig deeper into something that might be just a rogue comment that is looking for somewhere to land. And then they can pick up on that and be like, hey, when you said that, what did you mean? And build off of some of those conversations where in the early days here, we weren't into that mindset yet. We weren't doing those things. There was a stigma still around. And now it's a big part of how we operate. It's a big part of shifting the narrative of, hey, what's going on? Not what the hell's wrong with you? Like, and we've left that secondary statement behind a long time ago when we learned about how to really uncover stuff for the quote at-risk kid. And nowadays, it's not just the at-risk kids. Every kid has something that they're carrying, something that is going on for them, and it's different levels of severity, of course. And so it's a whole different ball game than just like an after-school drop-in place. It's more about really using some kid gloves with some youth just to help them understand that they can break a cycle, that they can figure out their value. And I think the police department under that community outreach bureau of like community policing and like wanting people to understand that they're people first and then there's the other stuff behind it is a dedication. And I think that's a reason that, my position's been preserved over the years. And it was rocky in the first few years because of the Dover budget situation that we had. But when you're the low person on the totem pole, you tend to be on the cutting block. But once the value starts to show and you hear people championing the work you do, which is, one of the reasons you do this work, you don't do it to get rich. You do it to hear that people appreciate what's going on and understand. And when you have that, you really find a way to deliver some pretty nice outcomes and some great success stories. And I think like all that combined behind the mission of the police department and what we've been able to do has allowed us to evolve. And we keep paying it forward with allowing college and university interns to be here as mentors. And then they're going forward. And some of them are going into the field of the human services in various stages, whether it's a criminal justice major looking to be an officer somewhere, or a psychology major looking to be a counselor, or a therapist down the road, or a social work major looking to be a caseworker. So they get that first taste of like working with a young person and understanding what makes them tick and like peeling back layers, and all that support helps kids understand that they matter and they have a voice. And then you can challenge them when they say something, you're like, no, that's not how you got to look at it. And you got to get them to look at some real world applications at times and say, let's try that again. And I think that's the other thing too, is we give them a lot of space to find grace. They mess up a lot and they say things that are like, yeah, that's not appropriate. And you have to kind of educate on the spot and say, let's try something different next time. I know that you didn't mean it this way, but this is how it comes off. And if you said it out in public, somebody might get really offended because of what you said. And sometimes it's oblivious. Sometimes they've just been taught in their life of that this is a funny thing to say or something. And nobody's ever said that's not appropriate until they come across a threshold and we're like, nope, let's change that up a little bit.
If you're listening to this podcast, you're already part of something bigger. You're part of my advocacy team. Leaders of Today and Peers Not Fears exist to amplify voices at the age when so many of us were having moments that shaped who we became, sometimes in silence, sometimes without support. These conversations are about what happens when voices are heard earlier, when leadership is named, and when young people are reminded that they matter. As we move from building these programs to sharing them more widely, my ask is simple. Help us carry these stories forward. Share an episode, talk about the work, pass it along to someone who works with youth, supports teens, or believes in the power of early leadership. Because when we normalize telling these stories and believing in young voices, we don't just change individual lives, we change what's possible.
But I like that the fact that we're a very unique program that's sponsored by a police department, and there's not much like that out there. And I get a lot of calls every year about, hey, I see that you're sponsored by a police department. How'd that happen? How do I do this? We need something in our town, but we don't know where to start. And it's very unique. I don't come across a lot of other places. Police departments typically, with youth programming, typically do, one-off programs, a bike rodeo for helmets, or maybe a boxing thing in inner cities, or sponsoring a little league team. That's about it. They just put their money and name behind it. That's about it. And here it's a whole list of deliverables. It's a whole process of playing a role in this community with youth development. And I think that's the other thing we're fortunate about too, is that the community that we are in takes the village kind of approach where everybody wants to work together, build safety nets, build supports, and work together. We really have worked well in bringing out things out of silos and kind of sharing resources and putting things together. And so I'm fortunate in that way too, that we have great partners and people that believe in each other and believe in the work we do. There's not a lot of competition for things, especially funding. Like if somebody gets funding, we always try to figure out how we can all work together usually. And I think that's unique. So it's a nice little world that we have in our backyard right now that hopefully will protect some of these young people and help them get ready for that, quote, real world experience when they do step out of their school in Dover, maybe.
Yeah, and I think what stands out to me is that it's a community investment, right? So it's not just that one-off program, or that would be great if we did that. There's the investment in the community for the community. And I wanted to go back to a couple of statements that you made pretty early in that answer, in that you're working with kids whose parents maybe don't have time to teach these skills. They may not have the skills themselves to teach them. And what I find pretty often in the systems that I come into is that they are providing these skills, but they're providing these skills to the kids that already have them, and they're just enhancing them. And we're missing the population of kids that are at risk. And so what I think is so unique and special about your program is that you recognize that, and like I do, is that every person needs to have access to working on these skills. And if we don't give them the space and the opportunity and the safety to make a mistake at it, then they're not going to try, and they're going to be another generation of people who don't have these skills. So I love that you're embedding teaching integrity and teaching problem solving and teaching, here's maybe not what to say and here's why. And I loved how you said not what's wrong with you, but like what's going on, what's causing you to behave in this way, and sort of taking the approach of you are human first. And I really love that. And that's why I feel like the work that we could do together is to not only give these skills to the kids that you're working with, but help them be able to share those skills with a larger community, go back and maybe even teach their parents and go into teaching their siblings and teaching the next generation of at-risk youth to not be.
Yeah, I think when you can teach young people to use their voice and share what they know with the folks around them, there's so many great outcomes you have. You have peers being willing to listen to peers and take that as a truth. Like, if he says so, that must be, I trust him. So, and then like, if you hear adults listening to kids give their point of view of things, like they blow us away. They totally blow us away. Because when you get to work with young people who understand that their voice is important and they've been given the green light to do so, what they deliver to you and what they share with you, you usually, even if you have high expectations, they usually go way beyond it because you're like, oh my God, I hadn't even known that you would thought that far. And then they're like, yeah, of course. I love that moment where they're like, of course, that's how I think about things. And I'm like, man, I hate to say it, but maybe I underestimated you, and let's push it forward more. Let's go. And that's, I think, what's really cool is when you get students who really are ready to take something further. And that's kind of where I think your curriculum and what we want to do together really pushes the envelope. We get them to a point, I think, here, but like there's something else that we could go beyond with where there is more of their peer-to-peer sharing and there's more of that like real true peer leadership that for kids that didn't see themselves as leaders. And that's the big piece, right? That's the big piece we're looking at. It's a strong majority of at-risk kids that come to us never see themselves as leaders. And so we're able to shed a little light on it. Well, why can't you do that? What's stopping you? And then they usually go, oh yeah, I guess there really is nothing stopping me. Like I thought there was things in my way, but I guess not. I just have to believe in myself and take a chance.
And the other piece that I've learned from working with some programs is that if I don't see somebody like me in a leadership position, I will never believe that I can be a leader. And so for you and I, it's starting that first group and like really leaning in and helping them see themselves as leaders because the kids watching them are now going to see themselves in that peer. And now they see themselves as a leader, and then it just sort of ripples around, and the limitations are lost. So now we're creating this opportunity that has no bounds.
Right. And that's where the excitement is, I think, as adults.
Yes.
And the wonder can be for the kids when they start to see, they peel back that layer a little bit and they're like, oh, now I see what you're talking about. I've never really ever wanted to like totally present it for them. I really like the discovery process.
Yeah.
And that's when the whole proverbial light bulb shines and they're like, now I get it. And you're like, that's what I was just hoping for you to do, man. Just get it once and then you got it. Now, what do you want to do with it?
Right.
And push them a little bit. It's hard to push someone when they're not ready, right? And that's, I think, the mistake I see. People who are in young people's lives who, care so much, they're always good-hearted, but they need to allow the space for a kid to want it. And you can always push a little bit here and there and like unveil a few things. But if you push too hard, they don't want it. It's kind of like you just have to like tease them a little bit and drop some stuff and be like, and let them ask the question, like, what does that mean? What are you talking about? I'm like, oh, do you want to hear more about that? And then instead of being like, oh, you need to be at this thing on this Sunday from like 1 to 3 for a leadership thing. Well, why? Well, you just need to be there. Sometimes you just can't push too hard. And if you present something that seems like you put a spin on it that makes it special and unique and I don't know, almost secretive in a way. Like I use some of that psychology with some kids, like purposely go up to a young person I'm trying to work with and say, oh, you know what? I was going to ask you something, but I don't think you're ready for that. And then I'll walk away. And then they're like, whoa, what do you want to ask me? Because they're like intrigued now. Nothing. It was a program that I thought maybe you would be interested in, but I don't know if you're ready for it yet. What do you mean ready for it? It's going to take like putting some time into some stuff and like, maybe really doing a little bit more than just hanging out here. Well, what is it? I don't know. Like maybe we should talk tomorrow. No. Tell me what it is. All right. Well, let's sit down and talk. And like now I've got their ear and they're curious as to like, oh, we're doing a storytelling session with a facilitator who's going to kind of teach you how to tell your story. Well, what do you mean my story? Well, like, where have you come from? What have you done? What makes you do things this way? What makes you think this way? What are your passions? What do you really care about? What are your values? Well, like, you mean like money value? Not exactly, but what do you hold dear to your heart? Like, like, wouldn't you like to talk about that and wonder what other people have to say? I guess so. all right, well, cool. Like, next Wednesday, we're going to close early at 5, then we can stay after with the group and do that. You want to do that? We're going to order some pizza. It'll be kind of cool. All right, I'll try it. And the next thing you know, they're in the next session, the next
Yeah.
session, or anything like that. So, like, I use that kind of trickery once in a while to lure a kid that I know once they understand, but then they tell someone else. That's the big thing.
Yes.
Because they're like, oh, yeah. Or like, hey, how was that? One kid will be kind of, crass. Like, well, how was that stupid thing you stayed for? Well, actually, it wasn't that stupid. It was pretty cool, man. Like, you should do it next time. You should talk to Steve. I don't know, whatever. I'll tell them that you're interested, And the next thing you know, I hear that like so-and-so might want to do it. And then I pull the same trick. Like, I don't know. There's a reason I didn't ask you before. I didn't think you were ready to do this. Well, no. Well, how come so-and-so gets to do it? I want to do it. They get jealous
Yeah.
of like, and then next thing you know, they're not sure even what they're jealous about. And you got them. They're learning something and they're taking something away that makes them a better young person for just thinking differently, right? Like just getting them to find something that's in their mind that they haven't gone. There's a pathway they haven't gone down that they didn't know was there. It's awesome. It's kind of like pulling the vines across and then seeing an opening. And you're like, whoa, there's a beach over there. That's pretty cool. I like that. Like, and having that vision in their mind of like, I just opened my mind to something different because I took a chance, right? And that's kind of what we get back to is like just giving yourself the okay to take a chance on something. And if it doesn't work, it's okay, right? You still got something out of that and you figured out maybe something else for your next decision. And that's, I think, that growth that they don't see it for a little while. The smart ones figure it out pretty quick. They're like, yeah, I totally understand. But the other ones that are like take some time and like maybe a year later, like they kind of maybe recognize it, maybe give you a real nice feedback of like, I never met that facilitator. I don't think I would be doing this stuff in school now, or I don't think I would have this job right now. I wouldn't have taken a chance on going to apply for it. And if they start to realize that there's a connection to some other previous decisions they made, it helps them for like this future growth of they get into another place where like maybe they get a chance to do something and they're maybe less apprehensive to give it a shot.
Yeah, that gets me to the question that I asked you on my survey about like what advice would you give to a youth or yourself as a youth? And you wrote that you might have taken more risks if you could go back. And so, can you talk a little bit about the risks that you think you missed as a young person and how that translates to the youth that you're working with taking risks or not taking risks?
Yeah, I think it comes back to we started our session with what made it easy to do some things as a kid. And I think that was because I was always given the support to do that, right? When you get to be a teenager or young preteen, teen, all these other variables start to fall into your lap. Am I cool? Do I think people think I'm cool? Hormones start firing. You start having maybe feelings for other people and stuff like that. And you get to maybe want to try looking at being connected to somebody that you're attracted to. And I think that's where my risk level really was kind of like paused because I'm a big guy, I was a big kid. And I had my own self-esteem issues of being kind of a bigger kid, not the skinny guy that was in my class with me that young women found more attractive and more appealing to be around in that kind of nature of like early relationship stuff. But I was still friendly with everybody, but I never really thought that anyone would want to be with me in that mode because I was too already friends with them. So I never really took those chances until later in my older teen years where I learned some stuff on and figured like I was able to take those risks. But when I was 14, 15, 16 years old, I wasn't willing to take those risks of being presented with failure. And that world of like boyfriend, girlfriends, partners, all that stuff. I was scared because I didn't want to hear no, because I just always thought that those people I was interested in liked other people. But I never knew because I never asked. And it's so funny because, like, in hindsight, you're like, well, I probably would have just said, hey, do you want to go to the movies on that Friday night? And if they said no, all right, that's cool. I'll probably be there anyway, but that kind of thing. Like, and just would have wrote it off and not even worried about it. But you allow your teen self to be like, well, I'm not the most handsome guy. I'm not the most fit guy. So they probably wouldn't want to be with me anyway. And you talk yourself out of taking the risk. I think that's universal to every generation of teenagers because there comes a time where your body changes. You face the typical teen hormone shift of you have different feelings for things. You get acne. You start to think that you're not that desirable to other people. You just feel different. And I think for whatever it's worth, some young people get through that easier than others because of what the status quo is and what the world around them says is the expectation. And I think like that's obviously always been something for every generation. And even for our generation right now, it's a total connection to what the world of social media shows them, where for our generation was more the magazine and TV stuff that we
Yeah,
were watching.
right.
It was really the same stuff. They weren't showing people that looked like me in commercials unless they were making fun of them or something, And the whole Mikey likes it. Well, he was a chubbier little kid, like, and he was going to eat anything. It was used as tongue in cheek for kids that looked like that. When I was Mikey's age, I probably looked like Mikey a little bit more. And now looking back, I was like, wow, that probably wasn't cool, like the way they did that. And now there's things out there that I, as an adult, say, wow, I really hope my daughter doesn't see that because that could affect the way she thinks about things. And like, I'm smart enough as an adult to see that. And I have to hope that she is now as a young, as an older teenager. And I think that's when it comes down to like, if I would have done things differently, it was just about self-confidence. And I think that's translates well to this generation as well as any. Like when you're in that preteen and teenage, like you really start to challenge your self-confidence about how you're viewed externally from others. And it's a big process to build confidence, I think, around that when you already feel like you're behind others, when you don't stack up right, and that's the bigger issue, societal, right? Where we have a stacking system. Like, well, the pretty people usually don't have to worry about some things. And like, there's some truth to that. And the average people have to deal with a little bit more with finding where they feel and fit. But you just try to like educate people on those things that you learned from about what real beauty is, what having like real love is. Cause I challenge kids all the time about how they view their relationships and things of that nature and really get them to try to see what brings them to any level that they think they're not at. Well, guess what? You do this really well. I bet you that person doesn't. And that's your plus. And like, kind of evens out the scale. It's not just two things on the scale. Like there's a bunch of stuff that kind of hopefully balance everybody out. And like, I think that's the biggest issue. And I think probably why we really face some of those bigger issues around teen, suicide and harm and things like that. And I mean, again, always been around, but like with our mental health stuff now and the variables that are presented in their world right now, particularly politically, there's a lot of stuff out there that a number of our kids are being challenged with to digest. And, we're digesting it as adults and we struggle. And just think how a young person who is being told that they don't matter because of how they look and how they feel and how they think they are. And that's just like, it's heartbreaking really, because it's left to parents and guardians and people that they trust and their mentors to reinforce the fact that they are cared for, that people love them, that there is hope. Like we have to hang our hat on some hope once in a while, but at the same time, like drown out the noise and be what you can be in your world. Find happiness, find something that pushes you to a direction of self-acceptance and self-value. And I think that's one of the things that, again, getting back to this community that we're fortunate enough to be a part of, like there's a pretty good safety net there of making sure that any of our kids are supported for the most part, particularly from an adult mentor standpoint. We're always going to have to teach kids tolerance and educate them because that's just the nature of growth. And not every kid's going to be like totally equipped with understanding differences of other people. You have to teach that.
I think it comes back to what you are creating is that acceptance and connection and community of feeling like there is a place where I may not feel like I belong elsewhere, but I know that I belong here. So, Steve, where would you suggest if somebody is listening to this, where would you have them go connect with you?
Well, very typically any afternoon coming down to our space. We're on the St. Thomas side of the McConnell Center, which is near the district court. And there's a door clearly marked with our logo. It's always open. I would also encourage them to go to a school counselor because they all know me. So if anybody happens to hear and find interest in wanting to move forward with exploring the teen center, one, it can just be a cold call of coming right in and being like, hey, I heard about you guys. We want to check you out. Or getting that facilitated kind of connection through like a counselor or a teacher or a community member, coach, or someone that knows what we do. And then the process is so easy. Just come down and check us out and see how it feels. When I talk to parents and guardians, there's two contract items. There's a registration form, which is just an easy Google Doc online. You fill it out, gives us some information about that young person and their family and allows us to connect with the schools with some permissions. And then the next part is all you got to do is come in and see where your young person would be. I don't let any student start here without a parent or guardian seeing the space. And I think that's an important thing. Like, you need to see, like, this is where they'll be. This is what goes on. This is the vibe. And that's, I think, kind of part of like the secret sauce here is like you walk in and you just immediately feel has a vibe. There's a life. There's a pulse. It's not institutional. I love the schools. I will always support our schools, but it's not a school program.
No.
It's totally separate. And that's what makes it a little bit different. Like a lot of families think that I'm part of the school district. And I'm like, no, we're part of the police department. And they're like, oh, that's different. And I tell them a little quick history of that. And they're like, oh, that's cool. Okay. And then, like I said, like when they get in here, I think they kind of look around, they see all the colors, the light, the life. That's why I always have them come during our operation hours. So that way they can see that there's kids here.
Feel the energy.
And like, I'll tell you what, like at least half the time when that young person walks in for the first time with their parent or guardian, oh, I know that kid. He's in my chemistry class. So there's always somebody they know. I always find it's really weird, but it kind of happens a lot. And I'm like, oh, well, so you already know that kid. That's great. Are you guys friendly? Like, well, we don't hang out much, but he's cool. I'm like, all right, that's good. And sometimes it's like, most recently I had a young woman come in and she was like, oh, I don't like that kid. Like right out of her mouth. Well, what's up? She's like, well, we ride the bus together and he gives me, like, we're always arguing. And like, these are two kids that are high functioning Asperger's. So they have a lot to say about things and they have a lot of like firm, grounded kind of beliefs of like how they integrate with each other. And I said, well, what's great is this place is big enough where you guys can still hang out in the same space. But, if you don't want to hang out and do stuff with him, you'll be fine. And she's like, well, as long as he doesn't say things to me. I'm like, okay. Like, we'll work around that. We'll figure it out. The person that she was with happened to be one of her caseworkers, was introducing her to the teen center. And she said, it's okay. Like Steve said, there'll be times where you're doing your thing and he's doing his, and you guys can agree to disagree on some things. And then I think that actually lowered her barrier a little bit because she realized, like, okay, I can be myself a little bit. And we've had 2 weeks in a row with her coming and it hasn't been any problem. So you hope that it kind of just jives. And I'm also very honest with parents and people like that. It isn't a place for everybody. It's just, the nature of things. It's like us as adults. Like there's certain restaurants that I've tried once that I just won't go back to because it's just not what I like or where I want to go. It's nothing against them. A lot of other people might like it. It's not me. I think it's a teen center for a lot of people. We've had kids come in and it's like, oh, well, camp for a couple of weeks. And then it just wasn't for me. But that's okay. Like I said, if it was, we'd have 400 kids here every day. It'd be crazy. So when you have about 120 or so registered, which is where we're at right now, and they mix in and different kids come each day a little bit, you're in that 20 or so per day. It really gives enough life to fill up the space. And then if you have a heavier day, hopefully you can spread them out a little bit more and do some things. If you're in a lighter day, they'll feel like they have the run of the place. It's great. Like on those days when there's only a dozen kids here, they're like, oh, cool. Like we can do anything now. They get a little more excited than having more people there. It's a win-win all the time. Just really.
Well, Steve, this has been a great conversation. I'm so excited that we got a chance to chat and learn more about the Dover Teen Center.
Thanks for welcoming me.
Are you ready to help the young people in your life unlock their inner strength and step confidently into leadership? The new workbook from Peers Not Fears, Your Voice Matters, Uncovering Your Unique Leadership. It's designed to help teens see the leader in themselves, step by step. It's not just a workbook. It's the first step towards a ripple effect that could change lives. Let's turn today's teens into tomorrow's titans. Thank you for tuning in to this episode of Leaders of Today, Teens to Titans. If you found this episode helpful, please subscribe, leave a review, and share it with other parents who might benefit from this conversation. Together, we can support our teens in building healthy, positive relationships and become leaders of tomorrow. Until next time, I'm Lorraine Connell, and this is Leaders of Today, Teens to Titans.